Hey guys, back here with another lesson. Hopefully things are going well for you and you're doing okay. So I want to get in and talk about energy and how energy moves up the food web or a food chain and kind of talk about what those things are. First of all, um, energy in an ecosystem, it starts with sunlight. And that's one of the important things to know is that if it weren't for energy coming into the earth, energy reaching the plants, uh, food chains, food webs, it wouldn't really work. So we kind of have to look and keep that in mind. And plants go through this process of photosynthesis. I know you've heard that before, and we'll have to look at that a little bit more later. But that is an important process. But that's really where you got to have energy to start with, and that's how food chains and food webs start. And really, that's the point of a food chain and a food web is to show how the energy, you can trace the energy up the food chain, up the food web. And one thing about it, I want you to notice the direction of the arrows. And I have a question here that I'd like to, it says, which is the correct way to show a food chain? And you have the arrows going up from grass to rabbit to fox, or you have them arrows going down from the top, fox, rabbit to grass. So which would be the correct way? And if you were thinking arrows go up, you are correct about that. Now, here's a food chain, and you can see in this example that we start with the grass, the plant here, and it's showing that energy from the bottom moves its way up the food chain. And otherwise, you might have thought the arrows should go the other way to show who's the predator, who's the prey. But they go up to show energy, and that's really the main reason why. When we start looking at what a food web is, well, a food web is just several food chains that overlap. So you can see in this example, you could probably trace out some different food webs. I'm sorry, food chains. If you went from the mouse to the raccoon up to the cougar, that would be one food chain. But many, many possibilities here. And the other thing that this shows is that let's just take an animal right in the middle. If you take out the raccoon, how many animals is that going to impact? Well, it's going to impact the cougar, but it's also going to impact all these other animals that the raccoon is eating. So in ecosystems, each animal is important, and we need to make sure we're not losing animals from a food chain or a food web. This here's a little flash animation simulation that we can look at to help us understand how this works. And one thing we start with, if we lose the plants, and maybe think about what's going to happen if we lose plants in a food chain or in a food web. Well, you watch both sides of this food chain, the numbers drop down to nothing. You have to have producers in a food chain or it just doesn't work at all. So to bring those back. We'll go over here and take a look at the moth. And if you look at let's say we lose the moth population and what that does. Well, that hurts the owl. Its numbers drop. Okay, since there's not as many owls around, then the bluebird population actually goes up to 30. But that makes the ladybug population drop, and it makes the prey of the ladybug increase as well. So it has an impact just by losing one animal, and you see how that works. If we look at the other side, let's say let's take out what they call the aphids. Well, then that impacts the rest of that food chain, and there's not as many hawks, so that brought the moth population up. So there are different scenarios. We could click different ones. What if we lose the bird here? That affects the owl. And some of these, it is kind of difficult to trace back why exactly it happens, but I'm sure we can figure it out. But point is that losing one animal impacts the rest. So a pretty good example of looking at that. Here's one more. This is the last thing we'll look at. And here's a simple food chain, and you go from plankton to the shrimp to tuna to the dolphin, and that would be a food chain. And I need to reset this here, and hopefully it'll reset. Oh man. Alright, let's try this again. It says, due to the lack of food, the number of plankton have dropped dramatically. So, if there's less plankton, what impact is that going to have on the shrimp? Well, you should be thinking, well, there's not enough food for the shrimp, so their population goes down. Well, now there's not as many shrimp, so the population of tuna go down. And not enough tuna for the dolphins. So now the dolphin population drops. So we'll check this. Hopefully, we get this right. That impacts low in the food chain really affect every animal within that. So let's look at the next one. It says large number of dolphin have been killed in the fishermen's nets. So without as many dolphin, the tuna population, we'll just say that goes up. And that's going to impact the shrimp. Now there's more tuna, and that's going to make less shrimp. Less shrimp, should it actually increase the plankton? So again, thinking those through, that's hopefully you're following along and understanding how that works. All right, due to a new type of disease, the number of tuna has dropped dramatically. How will this affect the rest of the food chain? So there's not as many tuna. Well, tuna are food for the dolphin. So without tuna, their population is going to drop. Well, shrimp are eaten by the tuna, so there's not as many tuna, so their population should go up, and that's going to decrease their prey. So let's check this. That should be the correct thing that happens. All right, one more scenario. Large number of shrimp larvae did not develop properly, and so they have died. So shrimp have died. That should mean, well, these have a better chance of surviving without shrimp. But the tuna population is hurt because there's not enough food for them. And if there's less tuna, there's also going to be less dolphin. So those are some things that impacts that are made in food chains and food webs, and hopefully you see how that works, and those are some good examples for that. So I'm going to stop with that, and we'll pick back up on another lesson here a little bit later.